today the nation pauses to remember the man and his dream. We're celebrating the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with discussions on how far we've come and how far we still have to go. Plus, we'll honor a local hero. That's just ahead on Mid-Morning.
WCBI's Mid-Morning with Aundrea, breaking away from your everyday.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's been more than 40 years since the height of the civil rights movement. Today, a look back at where we've been and then where we are today. It's part of our history project, and joining me is Dr. Michael Williams. He's Assistant Professor of History and African American Studies at Mississippi State University. Dr. Williams, good to have you here with us.
It's good to be here.
This is an important day for America. Many fought many years so that we could set aside a day to honor the life and the work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Tell me personally what it means to you.
The actual day?
The actual day, the celebration, you know, the pausing to remember him. I mean,
it means a whole lot to me, actually, because it gives me an opportunity to sit down and reflect about what my own responsibilities are. When you're talking about the life of Martin Luther King Jr. and his commitment to civil rights and civil equality for everyone, to have a day in which you sit around and think about that also reminds you of your own responsibility to serve mankind just as he did.
When we think about what Dr. King did and his activism in 2012 is very different than it was in the 50s and 60s. What do activists face today? What's their mission? What should it be today?
Well, their mission should be, in my opinion, pretty much the same things that it was in the 50s and 60s, and that's to challenge inequality and injustice wherever you find it, despite the circumstances of doing so. And you still see that today. What's a little bit different is it's not as, the consequences, so to speak, of activism isn't the same as it was in the 50s and 60s. We don't see the violence that we saw. Exactly. And the fact in the 50s and 60s when individuals understood that they needed to challenge inequality, there also was the possibility of death.
You have done extensive study on African American history, but you've paid particular attention to the life of a man here from Mississippi, Medgar Evers. Talk to me about your interest in Medgar Evers and his work and his life.
Well, my interest actually stemmed from my mother. When we were coming up, my mother always was talking about how Medgar Evers had not been remembered. And I remembered that. And when I got a chance to go to graduate school, I actually started doing the work on Medgar Evers then. And so after that, really working on the book and all, it really kind of reminded me of my responsibilities again.
What's the name of the book?
Medgar Evers, Mississippi Martyr.
And what's the research that you did? I assume you talked to family members, you went to some of the places where he worked. How did you find out the information?
Actually, I did a lot of research in the archives in Jackson, Mississippi Department of Archives and History, also the Library of Congress with NAACP papers in Washington, D.C. But I also did a lot of research in terms of interviews and things of that nature. So I did a lot of interviews in Jackson with people who went to grade school with him, college with him, and then also interviews with his brother Charles Evers, his sister Carrie Elizabeth Evers Jordan, and then also his wife, Miss Merle Evers Williams. Your
mission, in fact, was to find out not just about the work he did on the civil rights field, but you wanted to know who Medgar Evers was, what motivated him. What did you find out about that?
The motivation for him, and this was extremely important to me, was not so much change in society for his own lifetime, because he understood full well that he might not see the changes that he had worked toward while he was here. But more importantly, his dedication came to changing Mississippi for his children, and all of the upcoming generations that will come well after he was gone. And for me, that kind of dedication, even though toward the end of his life he understood that he may be killed for that, his dedication still remained true. And that was an important thing for me to find.
You work with young people at Mississippi State, people that are 19, 20, 21 years old. What do you think? Do you think they have a good grasp of what their forefathers did for them to afford them the opportunities that they have today?
Not always. They have an abstract understanding that there was a civil rights movement, there were people who were fighting against inequality. They understand that. But in my classes, what I try to do is make that time period real and alive today. And so many students
How do you do that?
By actually bringing it up to them and actually talking about what it really meant to get up in the morning and understand. And children are really kind of surprised by that. I'm going to get up this morning, I'm going to try to vote, or I'm going to try to integrate this area. I'm going to leave my family, but in the end, I may not come back home. And when you start talking to students about that, the real responsibilities, and you put it before them, oftentimes I tell my students, imagine if you get up this morning and decide that, okay, I'm going to come to class. That's my mission for the day. But I understand in doing that, I may be killed in the process. That's the kind of dedication that I try to bring to my students so that they understand what civil rights activism actually meant during that time period.
If Dr. King was here, if Medgar Evers were here, what do you think they would say about their struggle, what they did, and where we are today?
I think they would be pleased with some of the progress that's happened. But more importantly, I think as they were in the 50s and 60s, they'd be really concerned about sort of like a complacency that may still exist. One thing that Medgar Evers was very much concerned about was the idea of being complacent with the kind of progress that had happened. Because once you become complacent, you also become the victim of changes that you may not necessarily see. And so I think today, even though they'd be most happy with elected officials, with individuals' abilities and desires to vote, and the enthusiasm that you see on the political front, I think, again, they would be concerned with the economic situations, the poverty numbers, literacy numbers, illiteracy numbers, things of that nature. So
They'd say the fight continues, you think?
Most definitely.
All right.
Most definitely.
Dr. Williams, we appreciate your being here and taking part in this conversation today.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me.
All right. When we come back, a Starkville physician remembers his friend and his mentor. Your story is next on Mid-Morning. Welcome back, everyone. As we celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. today, we want to focus on how his work touched the lives of others. One of those is Dr. Douglas Conner. Dr. Conner was more than just the first African-American physician in Starkville. He was a civil rights leader who took King's torch and carried it across Starkville and Oktibbeha County, the state of Mississippi, and the nation. He was a tireless worker, and he was a mentor to many. One of his mentees went on to become a physician himself. Dr. Richard Holmes was the first African-American student to enroll at Mississippi State University, and he calls Dr. Conner his hero. Here is Dr. Holmes' story.
In 1952, in the second grade, I was 8 years old. I contracted a serious case of tetanus, which is lockjaw. I had a full-blown case of lockjaw. And during that time, my grandmother, which I lived with, treated me for a couple of days, couple of weeks. Anyway, I was a sick little boy, and so she sent for Dr. Conner to come and see me. And in fact, he came and sort of nursed me back to health. And I think I was the only boy in Mississippi, only boy in the country that enjoyed seeing the doctor every week and getting an injection. You know, and from meeting him, I was impressed with his, his kindness, his compassion, his demeanor. I'm sure when he looked in my eyes, he saw a very sick boy. But when I looked at his eyes, I didn't see that exchange. He was kind, and I knew then when I saw him, and worked with him, I said all I wanted was to be myself. I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a doctor just like it. And that back during the time when, African Americans did not have, total access to medical care, and he provided that. He provided it not only as a physician, but as a community leader, and also a civil rights leader. I remember him in the many nights going out to make house calls and going to deliver babies and come back. But he did it without any grumbling or concern. And in fact, a lot of times he didn't get any monetary compensation. So after I had made my recovery, I had gone to him and asked him for a job, and I started working in his office. I used to clean his office. After my grandmother died, she asked Dr. Conner to take care of my boy. And after she died, I just started working for him, and I just started living with him. Well, I went to Mississippi State my first day of enrollment was July 19th, 1965. And before that time, I had attended Wilder College in Marshall, Texas. And as a sophomore, I decided to take a couple of courses during the summer at State, and I planned to go back to Wilder in the fall. But I was young and impetuous, and in my enrollment, I didn't appreciate or even recognize the impact that my going to Mississippi State and enrolling would have on the community, and in the school and history. In fact, I did not intend to transfer, just take a couple classes, you know, but once I enrolled in, you know, and it was such a news item and such an event, Dr. Carr and people in the community reminded me that, you know, if I left, other students may not come. But I remember when on the day I enrolled at State, he drove me on campus, and when I got out of the car, all he said was to keep your head up. And I remember, you know, him being active in voter registration and the demands on the city for better employment, for better schools, and for better housing. I like to say that he's also a friend of the black community, but the white community also, because he kept the lid on things. People, I mean, he kept down the violence and the mistrust, and he's sort of a buffer between both. You know, so he was very, very instrumental in that.
A wonderful tribute to a wonderful man. When we come back, we'll talk more about the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Our panel will join us at the table when we come back. Okay, we're back, everybody. We are remembering the life and the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and we brought in some important folks from our community to join our discussion this morning. We want to welcome to the table Nadia Dale, to my right, Scott Colomb, and Reverend Tony Montgomery. Thank you all for being here. Thank you. Nadia, who works with young people at the Columbus School District. Scott is an attorney, and Reverend Tony Montgomery, we've seen him here many, many times, pastor of MU Baptist Church, and one of the founders and visionaries for Dream 365, which is really where I want to start this conversation. For several years now, Dream 365 has put on events to celebrate Dr. King's life. Tell us about the vision for Dream 365, the whole concept.
Well, Aundrea, this is our 6th year. And when we started, the vision was let's have a multiple day, multiple event celebration. And let's try and pull in every facet of the community, and let's try and partner with the community in such a way that it pulls us together. And then let's celebrate individuals, let's celebrate young people, let's celebrate Dr. King. So,
and it's really the weekend has encompassed a little bit of something for everybody, ending with the breakfast this morning, which is really my favorite part, because it honors people who are still in the fight and doing good things, black and white.
Yes, yes. And today, you know, we celebrate King. We celebrate the 50th anniversary of, you know, Ole Miss being integrated by James Meredith.
Yes.
But today culminates the weekend, and yes, we try and do something for everybody, and you always, you know, as our host, do such a fabulous job, so we appreciate you.
Well, I'm always honored to be asked to come back. I want to move now to Scott and Nadia, who are of different generations, slightly, Reverend Montgomery. Tell me personally what Dr. King's life and his work meant to you. Scott, let's start with you.
Yeah, I just think that Dr. King is an American hero. You know, he's a global hero. He's somebody who saw a problem and decided that he was going to do whatever it took to try to solve that problem. And he faced a lot of obstacles, faced a lot of turmoil, went to jail several times. Life was threatened. Unfortunately, he was taken away from us at a young age. But you know, he's a hero. He's a global hero, and he's an icon.
Nadia, for you?
Well, you know, one of the things I love about Dr. King is just that he really spoke to this idea that, you know, our struggles, we're as people, we're just very connected to each other, and your success, your struggle is also my struggle and my success. And, you know, just being able to have this weekend to be reminded of that and to celebrate that, especially at a period of time where I think we're just so separated, you know, as a world, everybody's just sort of very, you know, concerned with self. I just think it's a great opportunity to you know, celebrate that connectedness again. You
work with young people at Columbus High School. How connected do you think they are to the dream that we talk about so much?
I have to be honest with you, not enough, which is why, again, things like Dream 365, well, not even things like Dream 365 to me is such an important event because, you know, again, I do work with those students on a day-to-day basis, and it's not very often that you hear them speak or even think about the different struggles and challenges that we're facing today, let alone what we faced, you know, 50 to 60 years ago. So I just like that we do have this opportunity to be reminded.
How do we remind them, keep them reminded, Reverend Montgomery?
Well, as you know, with the young people, we try to focus on the essay contest and the arts contest. And sometimes I find in the essay contest, we find essays that people will pull up. This year we focused on, talk about a great Mississippian. And, you know, I did not know, shame on me, Bob Johnson is from Mississippi, the founder of BET. I did not know that, but one of the winners that you'll find on Celebrating Today actually wrote his paper about Bob Johnson and being from Mississippi and saying, you know, I want to be that kind of businessman. So we find that just kind of pulling them back and causing them to do a little research, do a little work, and then celebrate the work that they do through the essay contest and arts contest. It helps them get a good grasp on history.
We're going to take a quick break. I want you to think about this. How far have we come? How far do we have to go? We'll talk about that after the break. Stay with us. All right, everyone, we're back with Nadia Dale, Scott Cologne, and Reverend Tony Montgomery talking about the life and legacy of Dr. King. And we want to move the discussion now to how far we've come. You know, Dr. King, we always associate him with the dream. Scott, let me start with you. How far have we come?
Well, I think that's a complicated question. As far as equality under the law, we've come very far. I mean, under the law, people of all races are now allowed to vote. They're allowed to go to the same restaurants. They're allowed to associate with each other. Socially, I think we have some work to do. I think that still we have some social segregation, which is harder to change because that requires you really changing people's hearts and minds. In the long run, we're going to have to do a better job of probably integrating the schools. We still haven't done a great job at that. I think we need to try to make our public schools more attractive. But I think that we've come a long way. You know, 40 years ago, nobody would have thought we would have gotten this far. So I'm confident that we'll get there.
Do either of you find that the struggle now is with ourselves in many ways? Nadia, Reverend Montgomery?
I definitely say so. You know, most of the time, you know, when I think about questions like these, I'm thinking about it from an educational perspective. And when you look at the number of African American males that are graduating now versus the number that were graduating maybe 40 years ago, and you look at the challenges that they're facing, I think a lot of times it really is with just our own perceptions of what we can do. And you know, our
and
own
that's anybody, that's African Americans, that's whoever you are, right?
Absolutely.
Reverend Montgomery?
Success, you know, success is great. You see some good things going on out there, but then, you know, just when you think everything's good, we get challenged again, you know, by something that it seems like, okay, why are we going back through this? And there's still people who, you know, question, why do we celebrate this man, you know? And it's really out of not knowing. I still have people who say to me, hey, I just finally read the speech. I didn't know that it was so great a speech.
Well, we appreciate everything Dream 365 does to keep us reminded. Thank you, too, for being great leaders in the community. And thanks for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Aundrea. We appreciate you.
All right. Well, the work and the legacy of Dr. King lives on today. The miles he marched, the messages he spread paved the way for so many, including me. So here now is a little something I put together to a song I fell in love with when I heard the Stokes Beard Elementary Choir sing it 2 years ago at the Dream 365 breakfast. It's called Free at Last. Take a look.
Long life, longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. Going to walk non-violently and peacefully. Let the nation and the world know that we are tired now. We've lived with slavery and segregation 345 years. We waited a long time for freedom.
Got to be proud of how far we've come, and you hear that. Just ahead, we're going to look ahead to tomorrow on Mid-Morning. Stay with us.
Furniture provided by At Home with Bassett, Highway 45 alternate, Mayhew.
All right, coming up tomorrow, Dr. Gordon Castleberry here with health news for the men in our audience, plus what's new for the bride's bouquet. We'll start our countdown to the WCBI Bridal Showcase. We'll have that and more coming up on tomorrow's Mid-Morning. Thanks so much for joining us today. We'll see you tomorrow.